Good morning. I awoke in my humble little hotel bed to the sound of hundreds and thousands of birds outside. There are so many birds in Sydney, but this is what they sounded like. There was also this really weird smog cloud over these couple of buildings. I'm curious as to what that was. Now, funnily enough, we weren't actually supposed to have this day in Sydney. This day we were supposed to be heading back to Melbourne, but we were so tired from arriving here at 3 a.m. that morning that we decided to stay the day and go to the city. And that last minute decision is the most spontaneous thing that I think I have ever done in my entire life, and I'm actually kind of grateful for it. So we went back down to Darling Harbour, and last time we were here we saw these ships outside the National Maritime Museum. Now, there were 5 in total, but we only visited 4 because we were a little bit late for time. But either way, it was a really cool experience, and these ships, I think, are owned by the National Maritime Museum. So we went in and we visited them to see what they were all about. The first ship was this, and this is actually a replica. And it's a replica of the Duifken, which I hope I did not butcher that name. It's a Dutch name, and the only other pronunciation I could find on it for it online was Dijfken, and I doubt that that's the real pronunciation for some reason. But this was a ship from 1606, and it was under the command of Willem Janszoon. I also hope I did not butcher that. They touched down in Australia, in the north of Australia, in Cape York, and they were the first documented European contact with Australian mainland. And this is a ship that I've never heard about. It's not exactly touched on in history. We don't really look at the Dutch coming to Australia, but it was very interesting to see it nonetheless. And now this next ship will be very recognizable to all the fellow Australian students out there, and this is the HMB Endeavour. That's right, it's the HMB Endeavour, although it is a replica. Obviously the real one still isn't here with us today. And I'm also not entirely sure if it's the HMB, because that's what's written on the National Maritime Museum's website, or the HMS, which is on Wikipedia. But either way, it was commanded by Lieutenant James Cook, and it was the first ship to reach the eastern coast of Australia, with Captain James Cook stepping onto land at Botany Bay, which is a place close to Sydney, and where he basically claimed this as British land, took the news back to Britain, and they came back to colonize it. So, cool. Cook and his crew landed in Botany Bay in April of 1770, but this is a very pivotal moment in Australian history. A lot was set into action after this particular event happened, so we do actually learn about this a lot in school. The next ship was the HMAS Vampire D11, and this was an Royal Australian Navy ship that served between 1959 to 1986, and this, unlike the other ones, is not a replica. This is the actual ship that served, and it was honestly really cool to go inside it, although it was very small and congested, which can be expected of a ship, and it also smelt really stale. I'm not sure if that's the right word, but it did smell old, which you can also kind of expect since this is a ship with carpet in it and furniture and stuff, but I'm not entirely sure if the furniture is still the one that was on the original ship. By original ship, I just mean if it was on the ship while it was serving through its other tasks. And this was a warship, but it didn't engage in any active combat. It had a relatively peaceful career and mainly went to South Asia. All in all, the experience of getting onto this ship was a very interesting one and also a terrifying one because I could not imagine being on the ship out at sea for extended periods of time. Although it is still significantly better than the next ship that we visit, but it's still very small and narrow, and I feel like you would get easily claustrophobic. I know you can just go out onto the top deck and stuff, but surely in some sort of emergency situation you wouldn't be wanting to be seen by an enemy ship. It's just crazy to me how small these things are. And funnily enough, if you go onto the National Maritime Museum's websites and click on the pages for each of these ships, there's merch for each of them, which I found really interesting. And the next ship was actually a submarine, which is the HMAS Onslow. And now this is crazy congested and cramped. These people had to sleep in these beds. And now I have a very tall dad, and so the guides that were positioned at certain points, they were telling him, they're like, could you imagine someone like you having to stay on this? It's so claustrophobic in here, it's insane. But while researching, I came across some really interesting stories about this, and I want to tell you. So, in 1972, a disgruntled sailor who disobeyed orders actually caused the submarine to dive down into the ocean twice her safe operating death. And that is insane. I don't know how this submarine survived that. And yes, it was serving under the Royal Australian Navy at that time. And then in 1981, there was a carbon monoxide leak from one of the diesel generators, and it resulted in the death of a sailor. And so some procedures had to be changed for that again. The submarine served starting from 1968, and towards the tail end of its career, so in the early 1990s, it actually became a training submarine. So other sailors, I think that's what they're called, sailors on submarines, but sailors would come here to train first before being deployed somewhere else. And in 1999, it was officially decommissioned and handed to the Australian National Maritime Museum, where it remains today, which is why we saw it. And we skipped the final and fifth ship, which was just a small warship, and we figured, one, it wasn't that interesting, that we had to rush to it, and we were kind of short on time, so we just kind of gave up on it. But we did hang around the Australian National Maritime Museum, and it was interesting. Apparently they have the world's fastest boat there, although it is very small, so I don't understand what the purpose of it is. There's a helicopter in midair. It's crazy. And that pretty much concluded our day in Sydney, our last day in Sydney, and pretty much our last day of holidays where we were actually enjoying and not just in a car. So thank you for watching, and I hope that you're having a nice day.